Welcome, everyone, to Asian Pacific Voices Radio, where you'll find stimulating conversations about diverse stories and topics impacting our Asian Pacific American communities. Hello, everyone. I'm Sasha Fu, your host today. And today I am so pleased to welcome a special guest. Her name is Chef Leeann Chin. She has a very impressive resume, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But just want to extend this welcome to Katie. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me, Sasha.
I'm so happy to hear about what you're going to, your journey from growing up in the Midwest to your star-studded status as a chef. I'm just going to sort of summarize in short some of your achievements. You're a Los Angeles-based chef, an award-winning cookbook author, a culinary ambassador to the National Pediatric Cancer Foundation, and now an actor and playwright who has her own one-woman show called Holy Shiitake, A Wok Star is Born. Actually, I was going to steal that title and say, let's say hello to our Wok Star guest. Sorry, I was gonna steal that. But thank you so much for joining us. I usually start at the beginning, how people grew up, where they grew up, a little bit about their family, their roots. You are the daughter of Chinese immigrants, but you were born and raised in the United States and specifically grew up in Minnesota, which was and still is a predominantly white community. And tell us a little bit about that experience. Did you feel kind of as if you were perceived as other or as foreign?
We were like such an oddity. We were like aliens from outer space because they're at the time. I mean, I was born in, I'm not going to lie, I was born in 1965. Okay. There were so few Asians at the time. So I don't remember feeling necessarily like, oh, we're minorities. I just felt like we were freaks, really. And our parents did their best to assimilate. I think a lot of AAPI can relate to having parents that want you to achieve and to assimilate and be successful outside the home or act quote unquote American outside the home, but then inside, to respect traditional practices, heritage, being dutiful to your parents. And that can sometimes, be met with some tension, as you can imagine. Our neighbors brought us to Sons of Norway events where we'd sit on like drunk Santa Claus's, Norwegian Santa Claus's lap. So it was a confusing time because all of our friends were Swedish or Norwegian. I do recall, quite a few microaggressions that, in my one woman show, I do talk about that a little bit. And my friends, have come up to me going, oh my God, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. But I think, unfortunately, for a lot of us growing up, we're taught to keep our mouth shut. Don't make waves, right. Swallow it, push it down, and don't say anything. So,
do you think that's part of the immigrant culture, or is it particular to maybe Asian families?
I think it's both, but I think particularly more so for Asian cultures.
Well, I want to talk about your mom because she has had a tremendous, enormous influence in your life. I mean, most of us are affected by the influences from our parents, but in your case, especially with your mother, she also had an extraordinary journey. She was extraordinarily successful as a restaurant owner and built her own restaurant empire in the Midwest. What was that like growing up? And did you feel she was your model for success?
Oh, absolutely. My mother immigrated from China making just 50 cents an hour as a seamstress. And she loved cooking so much, she decided to throw a luncheon for some of her sewing clients in the 70s. And they were so blown away by her cuisine, they encouraged her to start catering. One thing led to another. She caught the eye of a local socialite who wanted to open a restaurant with my mom. That socialite happened to be friends with the owner of the Minnesota Twins, and he happened to be friends with Sean Connery. It's a crazy story. Sean Connery came to a party that my mom catered. I was there, serving Sean Connery, Robert Redford dumplings. And he then invested in her restaurant, and she went on to creative chain with over 50 local, it's a $60 million company, still exists. It's called Leeann Chin. So, she was such a remarkable, extraordinary woman. She, went through so much against all odds. She never even went to high school, had been making 50 cents an hour as a seamstress. She was in an emotionally abusive marriage. She was match made to my father, just, encountered so much sexism and discrimination, but she had to, again, swallow it, somehow outwit everyone at every turn in business, but always came out being an extremely gracious businesswoman. So, yes, she taught me so much about how to treat people. She treated the janitor the same way she would treat a CEO. She also
Mm.
was extremely philanthropic, and she gave back to the community. And she really taught me the importance of doing that, just to be a good person. But then also, because she gave so much to the community really gave back to her. I mean, she became a huge celebrity. She threw a fundraising concert with Prince. She didn't even know who he was. She came home. She's like, that Prince, he can really play the guitar. But you know what? More than anything, she never complained about anything, which was and continues to be a big lesson for me because I complain all the time.
Yeah, I'm curious about your mother's aspirations for you as you were growing up. I mean, here she was, this tremendously successful restaurant entrepreneur. Did she envision the same path for you? Because you came to the culinary world later in life.
I did. I think so many AAPI people can relate to the fact that there was pressure on us to become doctors, lawyers, professors, accountants, which most of my siblings became those things. I actually worked in the entertainment industry for 14 years before I became a chef. So I chose a really non-traditional path. And I think that drove me to be that much more successful and overachieving because I knew they had no idea what I was doing. Like I became a senior VP at Fox and my dad was like, thought I worked at Disneyland, and I was like working so hard to get the corner office and to prove to them like I can be successful. Don't you worry about me. But what happened is I was working for Fox. I wanted to throw a dinner party. I had completely forgotten how to cook. I kept calling my mom and asking her for questions. She jumped on a plane with frozen lemon chicken in her suitcase on dry ice. She showed up on my doorstep, cooked the entire meal, but let everyone think that I had cooked it because she was just
Oh,
that kind of mom.
oh.
And she opened my fridge and found only champagne and yogurt, was completely mortified. So it was just so ironic because I, spent all those years trying to make her proud by becoming an executive, but I had done the opposite by forgetting how to cook. So later in life, when I decided I wanted to really relearn how to cook from her again, I think she was very excited. I think that's when we really finally became friends.
I love that part of the story because that's also a large part of your one woman show, this connection between mother and daughter. What was the turning point, or at what point did you say to yourself, you know what? I can leave the world of TV and film marketing and I can actually give this a serious go as a cook, as a chef, running my own catering business. At where, how did you arrive at that point in time?
I think my life was lacking meaning. I was extremely successful in my career, but I felt empty. I felt
Mm.
like I didn't have a real purpose. I didn't have I mean, it was good to me. I was good at it, but I didn't really feel passionate about it. I felt like I had a disconnect from my mother and my father because she was so busy. I barely knew her. She didn't have time to really even talk to me. So I felt like I didn't really know my parents very well. I felt like, again, my life was lacking meaning. I was in a terrible marriage. I wasn't happy in my job. And I just sort of had this epiphany. And also, when I decided to leave my husband and quit my job as a senior VP, as a senior VP at Fox in the same month, don't recommend doing those two things in the same month. She came to my rescue through cooking instruction. She
Mm.
basically showed up on my doorstep and didn't leave. And we just, in these quiet moments, started cooking together.
Oh.
And that's when she started opening up about her life in China and all the things that she encountered, all of the emotional abuse that she encountered from her mother in law and my father. Um, and I just, something went off in my brain and I realized what an opportunity to really get to know my mom and to really get to know myself. And through that journey and through that process, I learned to love myself, and I truly learned to be proud to be an Asian American.
I think it's interesting also that you mentioned this is something that I've talked about with other people in my circle, is that sometimes families find it difficult to talk about feelings with each other, right? Especially Asian families. And so that is expressed through food, through our
Yes.
connection with food. That becomes a kind of surrogate therapy. And it sounds like that had that purpose in your life as well.
Well, I like to tell the story of how, when I got all A's, I would get a whole steamed fish and black bean sauce that my mother spent, all afternoon preparing for me. And then I would get pork chow mein if I got all B's. I'm sure you can relate, right? Love was, it was just demonstrated through cooking and the time and care she put into a special dish if you did something right. But you knew when you did something bad.
I know. Wow. That's so I presume that there were more fish on the table than the chow mein, right? Or the chow fun.
Well, I'd say more for my siblings than me. But also I feel like, maybe it was just my family, but like the whole point of, having dinner together was to eat, not to speak. So I remember
Mm-hmm.
when I went to my first sleepover when I was 6 years old to my friend's house, who was white, she was Norwegian, I guess, and they were just like talking to each other. And I was like, what? Because my parents they didn't even talk. It just,
Yeah.
and then we got up and left.
It's funny. I guess I watch these cooking shows, right? And they introduce the chefs and they say, oh, so and so studied in Paris with the blah, blah, blah of cooking school. I'm wondering if, since you are transitioning from a completely different field and industry, how were those first few years? Was that a challenge because you didn't come from a conventional background as far as your culinary training?
I'm going to say my mother was the toughest boss I ever had, even working at all those studios. She was like, I like to say, I went from working for the man to working for the woman. She was, listen, my mother was extremely charming and she was a very kind person, but in the kitchen, she was formidable. And she wasn't, a very vocal person, and she certainly wasn't a loud person, but she just commanded so much respect. Think about it. This is back in the 80s. She had this, like 1,500 employees, many of which at the time were Norwegian and Swedish, and
Mm-hmm.
they just respected her so much.
Mm-hmm.
So, first of all, it took a while for me to get over the fact that I was suddenly going from being an executive, like flying first class, carrying a briefcase, whatever, to like lugging trash up the stairs and peeling shrimp all day and frying chicken pieces. That was humbling. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it took me a while to get over that, just to be completely honest. And I explore this in the show too. Like, I kind of felt like I was above it. I was just, I'll let my mom handle all the cooking. I'm just going to get us on TV shows and stuff like that in marketing. But it became very clear that I had to prove
Step up.
myself and
Yeah.
establish my own credibility, because
Sure.
she tricked me. Because we had a catering business together called Double Happiness.
Mm-hmm.
I came home and she goes, you know what? I'm going to meet my friend Denise in Europe for 3 months. Bye. And she just picked up and left, because she knew the only way I was going to learn is if she did that. And I just like burst into tears, but she knew exactly what she was doing. It has been, definitely a challenge. And by her doing that, I've had to establish my own credibility. I've written 5 cookbooks now. So I kind of had to figure it out on my own, because I didn't go to culinary school. But, as I like to say, everything I know about life and cooking, I learned in the kitchen from my mom. And I still hear her voice.
How did your mom feel about your success in the kitchen and as a chef?
She was proud, but she was also a tiger mom. She was also extremely critical. And she liked to, let's just say, vocalize her criticism on national television. For example, when we had our PBS series called Double Happiness, because look, my mother hated to be on TV, so I had to do all the talking. You know what I mean? I'd have to vamp and I'd be like, all right, so if you don't have Asian hot sauce, you could use Mexican hot sauce, right, Mom? She goes, no. And then we were in Hong Kong for the Food Network. We're in like the largest floating dim sum restaurant in the world
Mhm.
called Dumbo, and we're in the kitchen, and the cameras are filming, and the dim sum master is teaching me how to make har gow. And my mother turns to me and she goes, "Why are you so slow?" Like, thanks, Mom. So again, I think she was proud of me, but there was definitely some like East meets West clashes. Like the time we were going on the Today Show for the first time, and she insisted that we show, a whole chicken with head and tail to symbolize
Mm.
family unity. And I'm like, Mom, we cannot show a chicken head on national television. And she was like, oh, yes, we can. I'm like, no, Mom, we can't. It was the only fight we ever had. Like, she slammed her door, I slammed
Who
my
won?
door.
Who
I
prevailed?
won. I
You
won. I
won.
won. I won. I was like, and she was not happy.
Did you have the chicken
But it
feet on TV though? Chicken feet?
no, I mean, I said to the producer, I was like, listen, this is customary to show this, and they were like, no, 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 no. We don't want to be showing a chicken head on television. So I definitely, like, there were moments of shame. Like I remember we did this Food Network special, and this is before social media. I printed like 500 postcards. I mailed them out with a tune-in notice, and my mom pulled me aside and she goes, the thing is, Chinese people don't go around saying, look at me, look at me. And I was like, I turned into like a 6-year-old again, and I ran into my room and I cried.
Oh, well, that's interesting that she says, well, we're not to be boastful. That's a character flaw, right? To boast about ourselves. And yet,
Yes. I mean, can you relate? Were your
yes,
parents the
I
same way?
definitely can relate. And yet, your earliest career was in marketing and promotion, and which is all about look at this, putting a spotlight on stuff. So I'm thinking your mother was probably chagrined at some of the things you had to do in your marketing career, but that actually came in very handy as you launched this collaborative collaborative relationship with your mother in the kitchen.
It's definitely a push-pull situation. You know what I mean? Like she enjoyed going on the Today Show, but she didn't like how like she felt like I was a show off. I guess I am. But I mean, like if you want to be successful in this field of work, you kind of have to be.
Well, I think she probably grudgingly admitted that you were probably, yeah, you were doing the right thing. You were doing the right thing. So tell us a little bit more about how you decided that you were going to put this rich tapestry of experiences together in a one-woman show.
It's just some kind of divine calling, because the truth of the matter is I'm not a trained actor. I was never a writer, and something was telling me to write the stories down. And I did start writing before she passed away. And then she passed away, and I had all this material in a canvas bag, and it was just too painful for me to even crack that bag open again. And then COVID happened, and, she had passed away. COVID happened, and I just, I thought, if not now, then when? Life is short. Am I going to
Mm.
put on a one woman show when I'm 80 years old? Probably not. So I took a master class in developing a solo show. I spit out a show, and it was super long. I performed it on Zoom, and I just kept saying yes. It's gone through a lot of iterations, but I've performed it now about 12 times, twice in Hawaii. And I keep doing it because of the reaction I get from the audience. People are crying, they're laughing, they feel like they can relate, I think, more than anything, because there are definitely, themes of mental health. My sister, unfortunately, had committed suicide when I was a young child, and I cover that in the play. I don't want you to think it's a sad play. I mean, there's humor and pathos, but it really sort of drove how my family dealt with it, and why, and in many respects, why my mother became so successful, because all that pain drove her to be successful, drove her to cook, to
Mhm.
heal through cooking, and as a result she became this huge superstar. So I just really want to honor her culinary legacy. I want to be able to help people through spreading the message of getting help if you are suffering from mental health issues,
Mhm.
to you know break the cycles of shame and being scared to share your truth. Brene Brown, which talks about shame, you take away
Yeah.
its power when you release it and you talk about it. And I think the fact that so many people have come up and thanked me and have said, I've had so many similar things happen to me, and all I want to do is hug my mom or hug my daughter. And then I felt I was very, very proud when one of my white straight male friends came up to me after the show and he was crying. So I realized, yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. You don't have to be Asian. You don't have to be a woman to relate to
Yeah.
some of the universal, themes of the immigrant experience.
Yeah. I would say that is universal. I think this hunger to have stronger, deeper bonds with our loved ones and the things that prevent us from doing that. And in your case, it was not only that your mother was so busy with this other career, but there were some other factors too, perhaps something in her psychological makeup that kind of prevented her from being as open-hearted when you were younger, before you kind of had this rapprochement. Did you see that also with with your siblings, your mother's relationship with your siblings?
Oh, absolutely. It was the same. I think that because I had that fortunate experience of being able to cook with her much later in life, I
Yeah.
think we probably talked about more things than some of my siblings were able to, but they bonded with her in other ways. Like my brother is like a poker shark. He actually teaches introduction to poker and business calculus at the
Wow.
University of DePaul. So he taught her poker, and they started, they were in poker tournaments together
Oh
when
my
she was
God.
like, in her 70s.
She's a
And
card
people
shark.
thought she was just total card shark, but so unassuming. Like she let people think what they thought. They just thought she was like, oh, grandma, like immigrant grandma with an accent. So they were, oh my gosh, at this poker tournament in Palm Springs, and Matthew Perry was sitting there. And I think they were like, oh, she doesn't know what she's doing, whatever. She ends up annihilating the table. And Matthew Perry says, damn, grandma's got some skills.
I love that. She just takes their money.
I know. She just smiled, like her little cute
Yeah.
smile.
Yeah. Your mom
It
was
was it
your mom is very clever. Your mom was very clever. She knew her inner strengths.
Yes, she always knew what she was doing.
Yeah.
So, I just feel so fortunate and grateful that I have the opportunity to tell her story and tell our story. And also, it's just a great document for my children as well, because they were 2 when she passed away.
Oh.
And so I'm glad that they can be part of this journey with me as well.
Katie, I want to ask you a little bit about your work with the National Pediatric Cancer Foundation. What have you discovered in working with that group about the connection between food and health, especially in children?
It's been just a wonderful experience. I am their culinary ambassador, so I develop recipes for them. I do a monthly television segment on Bloom TV where I cook alongside host Gail Gallardo and a pediatric cancer warrior, which is it's beautiful. It's heartbreaking and beautiful at the
Oh,
same time. But all the kids that come on air with me are, first of all, they're also mature, and they're also, they're sages and also grateful for to be there. So I like to teach the public about eating healthy foods, eating the rainbow, because they can contribute to warding off cancer, loading your body with lots of antioxidants and phytochemicals, and how creating habits very early on in life can set you up for success for the rest of your life. And there's fun ways to do it as well. Like we try to make it fun, and most of the recipes that I do share are almost like arts and crafts projects that happen to be food, and are, whether it's like monster sandwiches
oh,
or,
nice, fun.
caterpillar fruit salad. So that's been just incredible. And I also, working with City of Hope a few years ago, that's how I was able to go to the White House under the Obama administration and teach families how to cook with cancer fighting ingredients.
Wow, what an honor! I'm sure that was one of the highlights of your career. What about when you look back on what your mother was cooking and how she was cooking in the 60s and 70s? What favorites have you taken from your mother's repertoire and updated in Katie Chen's fashion?
I think about my childhood and I think about chow mein, and that was one of the comfort foods. And she could rarely spend time with us, but when she could, she would make this huge batch of it in our huge wok, and we'd all sit around the table and eat that. So that definitely is like one of my comfort foods. But in terms of, putting some modern spin on it, because my catering business, Walkstar Catering, we do specialize
Yeah.
in modern Asian cuisine. So I like to play with things like combining miso and butter into a delicious umami sauce that has sake and oyster sauce, and combining that maybe with some traditional noodles, for example, taking delicious favorites like kung pao chicken, let's turn that into a pizza, but why don't we use cauliflower crust to appeal
Oh,
to how much
yeah.
people love cauliflower crust
Yeah.
right now. So I try to take some of her traditional favorites and put a modern spin on it. For example, one of our most favorite desserts is a raspberry Nutella wonton, because wonton skin is really a vessel for anything.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to say, like, how can that be bad? So you just put Nutella, raspberries, put it in a wonton wrapper, a little egg wash, deep fry it for just, 30 seconds, drizzle more chocolate on it, raspberries, ice cream. It's to die for.
My mouth is watering as you describe this. I just wish I could taste it.
I know. Well, next time we'll have to do this in person.
Yeah, I know.
Um,
I know.
yes, yeah.
Um,
So try to stay true to her, authentic recipes. But at the same time, I'm living in LA, and people have definitely different dietary restrictions and preferences too.
I'm going to ask you a little bit about the future for family-run ethnic restaurants, particularly Chinese, Vietnamese restaurants, that type of thing. During COVID, it was particularly hard on the restaurants in Chinatowns all over the country because, obviously restaurants were shut down. And then there was a sort of um, anti-Asian, anti-Chinese sentiment that was running rampant. I think some of those family-owned businesses have had a hard time recovering. Do you What do you think is the future of these family restaurants that specialize in home style cooking? The kids, they want to become doctors or accountants. They don't want to be part of the family business. Business is too hard. Hours are too long. There's too much risk. I'd like to think that the days of going to the family run Chinese restaurant are not over.
I hope so. It's still, I think the most popular of all ethnic cuisines in so many ways. I think it has been so difficult with COVID, along with some of the other factors that you're talking about, because all good Chinese parents want their kids to go to, you know, college and graduate school and become a doctor. So, I think for certain Chinese restaurateurs, they do wish their children go into the family business, but the hope is you want the next generation to do better, right? To be
Hmm.
educated,
Hmm.
and then for each generation to continue to succeed at a higher plateau. That being said, I think it is a challenge. I think, there's a few restaurants, left in Chinatown, but, a lot of folks left those ethnic enclaves, moved to Monterey Park, right? And moved to the suburbs.
Yeah.
I think the exciting part is with, Food Network and, the popularity of all these food cooking shows, there's a whole new generation of AAPI that are into food, uh, launching their own businesses, their own restaurant chains, and
Right.
doing it, very innovatively. Or like, I don't know if you saw this documentary called Donut King. I think it was on Netflix, but it explores the whole, um, you know, huge growth of donut restaurants in the Vietnamese community. It's a
Hmm.
fascinating documentary,
Hmm.
but it does end on this really hopeful note with this young millennial who takes over her parents' donut shop, but she puts her whole social media spin on it and all sorts of cool, new donut creations that are super trendy. She went like viral on TikTok. So I think that's beautiful. And I think, a whole new generation is exploring their heritage now through food.
Yeah, that gives me a little bit of hope, that these restaurants are not going to become extinct and that we continue to celebrate our culture through our food. I'm going to touch really briefly on something regarding our political climate, which is that we've seen this accelerated effort to intensified effort to devalue diversity in American culture. And since you are promoting this idea of diversity and inclusion through our food habits and what we enjoy and what we eat, how does this strike you personally in the last couple of months as you've watched this juggernaut?
It's a very trying time, and I think a lot of people are afraid and they just don't really know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of my folks that work in that space, the now dirty word DEI, they're really not sure what they're supposed to be doing, having to scrub language, having to scrub websites. I think we all know that it's so important and so necessary. So I think that we will continue to prevail. I think we just have to be creative in the ways that we do it. I think that we have to band together. I think that we have to, for our children's sake, not, make them afraid. Like, we still have to be unapologetically Asian, and we have to stand proud, and we have to do what we can in our own way. But we also have to be careful. I mean, that's the truth of the matter. So I just continue to foster whatever, community support I can build through my work with the mayor's office, through being on the board of Teach AAPI, to be, just be educated. Also, you also can't put your head in the sand. You have to be educated, and you have to put yourself ahead of it and be smart.
Great words. Chef Katie, before we wrap this session up, I'm going to do something playful here with a couple of really quick fire questions, and you just answer whatever comes to the top of your head. Favorite junk food?
I'm going to say Doritos.
A specific flavor?
Cool Ranch, just because it reminds me of the 80s.
Okay.
And my daughter loves them too.
Oh, okay. Okay. What is the condiment that is always in your pantry?
Sriracha.
Right. Of course. Least favorite vegetable?
Brussels sprouts. Wah, wah. I have that gene that makes them taste super bitter. Did you know that?
Really?
Certain people have a gene. Like, certain people have a gene that makes cilantro taste like soap. I have that one that makes Brussels sprouts taste like bitter.
Oh, okay. I think there's a similar gene for beets, because I know some people really detest beets.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. If you had one last supper, what would you eat?
My mother's famous Cantonese chow mein.
Oh.
And a martini. And French fries. And raspberry Nutella wontons.
I love that. If we were making a movie about your life, who would you cast as yourself?
Well, we are hoping to develop my one-person show as a television series, and actress Cara Wang, who co-starred in Good Trouble with Sherry Cola, is set to play the younger version of me, the older version of me. Holy cow! I'll say, Lucy Liu. Because let's face it, there's not that many Asian actresses my age. Wait, there's all the Joy Luck Club girls too. So I'm also going to say, Tamil and Tamita.
Okay, good choices. And this is probably the harder one. Who would you cast to portray your mom?
Michelle Yeoh. Because I told you my mom was formidable. And when you think about Michelle Yeoh, you think formidable.
Yeah, I think that is an excellent choice. That's an excellent choice. Returning to the subject of your one-woman show, there's some performances coming up that you might want to tout. If you're in the Los Angeles area, yeah.
Yes, if you're in the LA area, I'm performing it actually this Sunday, March 30th, as part of the Los Angeles Women's Theater Festival at 7 p.m. I'm also performing it on May 3rd to kick off AAPI month. It is a fundraiser for the Asian Women Empowered Initiative at Asia Society on May 3rd at 8 o'clock at Whitefire Theater in Sherman Oaks. So you can go to whitefiretheater.com for tickets, with a portion of proceeds benefiting Asian Women Empowered.
I know there's going to be a lot of us who will be there to support.
I'm so excited. And yay! Spoiler alert, you may or may not be enjoying some hot dumplings after the show.
Even more of a reason to attend. Yay.
Yay.
Thank you so much, Katie. Our time has run out, but it's been a wonderful conversation. I've really enjoyed chatting with you.
Me too. Thank you so much, Sasha.
Yeah. So everybody, we want to give Katie not only her thanks, but we want to let our listeners know where they can find out more about Katie and what she's been up to. Do you want to offer your social media contacts?
Yes, you can find me at Chef Katie Chin on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter or X.
Okay. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
Well, we also want to hear from our listeners. And if you have suggestions for future guests or future topics, please let us know. Reach out to us. Don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on Facebook, X, Instagram, and YouTube for more of these exciting and inspiring conversations. Asian Pacific Voices Radio is produced by Asian Culture and Media Alliance, and that is also known as ACMA. It's a nonprofit group dedicated to empowering the Asian and Pacific Islander communities through a voice through the media arts. If you'd like to learn more about ACMA or support ACMA's programs, you can go to acmasocal.org. So once again, I'm your host, Sasha Fu. Please join us next week for another, well, we hope, exciting and thought-provoking episode of Asian Pacific Voices Radio. Until then, take care.